In the boundless wilderness of evolutionary history, the existence of certain lives is itself an ancient poem that modern logic can never fully decipher. High atop his neck and back rose two parallel rows of sharp spikes, stretching dozens of centimeters long like cold bone shards piercing from deep skin toward the firmament, inspiring awe and dread. The world assumes that such a bizarre, heavily armored frame must belong to a violent predator contesting for dominance across the South American continent. Yet, as the sunset drains the last residual crimson from the floodplain, he survives as the most incredible miracle of gentleness in an era governed by slaughter. Tonight, by the faintly flickering hearth, let us step into his true life with this story that requires no effort to remember, Amargasaurus ama. In cold modern guides of paleontological taxonomy, he merely represents a medium-sized, oddly adorned early diplodocid dinosaur. But in the true night of the late Cretaceous, a time filled with tectonic uplift and torn forests, Ama utilized a near-eternal, ultra-slow pace to find an unbelievable peace amidst the Earth's cruelest upheavals. This is not a loud logbook praising bloody conquest and short video-style roars, but a midnight lullaby of how to transform the heavy burdens of destiny into melodies within the wind, guiding the world to complete silence before darkness falls. 100 million years ago, the Patagonian plains were undergoing an exceptionally long, invisible shift into drought, the air forever filled with a slightly sweet, coniferous fragrance born of rising geothermal heat. It was an era where armored dinosaurs coexisted with massive herbivores, layers of ferns blanketing the red earth, leaving only faint trails leading toward distant, placid waterways. Ama stood right at the edge of this dense forest packed with existential pressure, his 9-meter frame appearing remarkably stable beneath the shadows of towering Araucaria trees, like an ancient stone sculpture carved by the ages. The first turning point of his destiny was driven by an unannounced fracturing of the strata, as the narrow canyon sheltering his clan was ruthlessly blockaded by falling debris during a midnight earthquake. The extreme scarcity of food plunged the once peaceful herbivorous titans into a tightly wound state of internal power struggle overnight, their social order collapsing entirely under panic and hunger. Larger diplodocids fought frantically in the center of the territory to seize the last remaining green canopies uncrushed by falling boulders, slamming each other with heavy tails as the dull crunch of fracturing bones echoed through the wilderness day after day. Ama watched all of this in silence. He saw his once comrades tear each other's skin apart in mutual slaughter, their beautiful hides shattering into useless remnants under heavy blows, their blood staining the withered moss. As a medium-sized Amargasaurus devoid of lethal weaponry, he was naturally marginalized in this cruel game, the old clan leader glaring at him with eyes full of violence and exclusion, plotting to banish this potential food competitor forever. At that moment, a certain inward wisdom awoke deep within Ama, not the urge to fight, but a profound weariness toward endless internal friction and a deliberate choice of self. He did not meet the leader's roar filled with jealousy and intimidation, nor did he attempt to use his sturdy body to crash open a bloody path toward vain power. Instead, on an evening when the heat receded, he turned his body with agonizing slowness. Stepping upon the red soil fractured by the earthquake, he moved like a pine needle drifting silently through time. Without a single trace of regret, he walked away from that frantic territory, step by step, toward the desolate and quiet unknown wilderness. Leaving the shelter of the clan meant Ama had to face the apex predators of the dark night operating on laws of lightning-fast slaughter alone, such as primitive tyrannosauroids adept at ambushing deep within the woods. In an ancient conifer forest devoid of open sightlines, a single second of oversight or panic meant a herbivore lacking agile turning capabilities would be ruthlessly erased by the dark. Yet within Ama's 9-meter heavily armored frame flowed a near-detached certainty. He could not learn to dash frantically through fallen leaves to prove his existence like the predators did. Instead, he chose to carry absolute relaxation into his very marrow. He walked so slowly, with each step, his short, column-like limbs paused in the air for several seconds before his wide feet pressed into the dry sand, releasing a dull, drawn-out, and deeply therapeutic rustling sound. His posture did not resemble a journey, but rather an act of using his body to stroke and feel every pulse of the earth. This slowness, ironically, created a beautiful resonance between him and the surrounding night. The long trek accumulated deep, blunt pain in his neck muscles, and the high double rows of back spines, burdened by supporting keratinous sheaths for so long, constantly radiated a heavy ache of fatigue. Yet he never stopped, for he knew that on this cruel wasteland, survival wisdom was never determined by physical might, but by who could be the first to find an absolute haven to anchor the soul within a crisis-ridden night. Finally, as darkness fell completely and the winds over the plain softened, he discovered an exceptionally hidden, flat clearing beneath a towering sandstone cliff, densely enclosed by ancient redwoods. It was a natural sanctuary accidentally sealed by nature. The towering wall of trees blocked the furious monsoons entirely, while the hot air was replaced by the cool moisture unique to the damp soil. Amma stopped slowly at the edge of the clearing, slightly closing his deep, serene black eyes as he drew the cool night mist into his wide nostrils. The panic of the past several days finally found a harbor to snuggle into within this green stillness. In the shallow documentaries of later generations that obsess over behemoth battles, the spine-adorned Amargasaurus is routinely marginalized, as if its sole purpose was to be a mere appetizer for giant carnivores. The world assumes that in a realm ruled by the jungle law, any creature lacking the colossal horns of a triceratops or the tail club of an ankylosaurus is destined to become a cowardly sacrifice in the meat grinder of fate. Yet this arrogant view completely fails to read the profound wisdom of restraint in Amma's bones. His double rows of long spikes were not meant to rip opponents apart, but served as an invisible psychological wall allowing him to masterfully evade the storms of the era. In his third year of living in this flat clearing, on a midnight when the mantle vibrated faintly, danger inevitably pierced the tree line, descending upon this quiet sanctuary in its coldest form. A massive primitive abelisaurid, starved and exhausted from failing to capture prey for long, followed the faint scent of life, slipping noiselessly through the mud to the edge of Amma's resting area. It was a silent gamble of will and survival unfolding in absolute quiet. The predator's eyes, glowing with a ghostly green light, moved through the dark like a shifting signpost of death, its heavy breath chilling the surrounding air. The ancient cicadas singing in the dark folded their wings instantly, the shrubs fell deathly still, and the moisture in the air seemed to freeze into ice under the carnivore's ravenous gaze. Yet, facing an ambush terrifying enough to shatter the souls of any small species, Amma displayed a near-sacred, breathtaking composure. He released no useless roars to vent his fear, nor did he bolt frantically like his kin. Instead, he dropped his center of gravity entirely, grounding his massive body firmly into the soft mud. He ceased all movement completely, burying his head deep between his thick forelimbs and presenting his high, thorn-covered double-neck spikes, stretching meters long and heavily sheathed in keratin, straight toward the hunter, turning himself into an impassable bone barrier. In the occasional flash of lightning tearing the night, these tall rows of spikes reflected a cold, heavy density like iron ore. This was no soft flesh to easily strike, but a grey wall of bone rising abruptly from the earth. The ferocious abelisaurid slammed to a halt a mere few inches from Amma's spikes. It bellowed madly, scratching large sheets of mud away with muscular hind legs, trying to find a non-existent gap. Yet before his mountain-like, unshakable aura, the madness in its eyes was replaced by despondency, forcing it to retreat step by step into the dark forest floor. With the thrilling confrontation dissolved, midnight on the late Cretaceous plain welcomed its most tender and fated hour. The heavy clouds finally split under the night wind, and a faint, emerald-tinted moonlight filtered through gaps in the canopy, illuminating the tiny green sanctuary where Amma rested and lining all shadows with a sacred silver edge. What truly brought the absolute quiet to this wilderness was the stream of gentle, delicate midnight breezes drifting across the canyon at this very moment. As the wind swept with a near slow-motion flow through the parallel rows of Amma's long neck spikes, an ancient miracle, one that would heal everyone hundreds of millions of years later, unfolded on schedule, because the dual spike rows maintained a precise, streamlined distance and were armored in weathered keratin. The wind passing through the gaps released no harsh whistling, but produced an exquisite physical resonance. Sha-sha-sha, sha-sha-sha, it was a low, raspy, yet perfectly rhythmic melody born of bone friction against the air, a sound so faint it resembled 1,000 gentle hands rustling through dried pine needles simultaneously. This was not merely the sound of the wind, but a natural white noise lullaby performed by Amma using his own spine for all wandering souls in a world packed with existential anxiety. The low-frequency melody possessed an irresistible magic, flowing slowly through the air, consuming every shred of residual daytime frustration and tension until the vast night returned to infinite peace. Amma closed his eyes. Within his long respiratory tract, he synchronized his breathing with the movement of the music into a deeply grounding pre-sleep rhythm. With every inhalation, the warm, clean floral fragrance swirled within his chest. With every exhalation, he seemed to breathe out the day's fatigue into the secure boundary woven of melody and shimmering starlight. The end of life arrived quietly and elegantly. For Amma, it was merely the most peaceful and enchanting evening among countless deeply comfortable nights. It was an ordinary end to a dry season in the late Cretaceous, the air carrying the subtle bitterness and caramel aroma of drying gymnosperms, while thousands of gentle meteors streaked across the dark sky. Amma was too old, his spine had accumulated countless calcified traces from braving storms and bearing heavy pressures, and every movement of his twin spike rows required enduring a blunt ache deep within his joints. Yet he showed no panic of finality. On that star-studded night, he simply returned to the center of the flat clearing that had accompanied him for a lifetime, laying down slowly in his most familiar posture that he cradled his tired head gently within a soil groove softened perfectly by fallen leaves, allowing those spikes that stood tall for a lifetime to face the midnight breeze one last time, releasing that decades-long, drawn-out low hum. As the warm gravity took full custody of his skeleton, his multi-ton body completed its final descent under layers of red silt and volcanic ash, exhaling the last deep, long sigh of his life. The breath condensed into a giant white mist in the cool air, enveloping the last rustling notes of the bone chimes, drifting slowly toward the open floodplain, merging into the cosmos without a shred of regret. The surrounding forest fell into absolute stillness in an instant, the sea breeze died down, the leaves ceased to shake, and even the ancient cicadas folded their wings, as if witnessing together the eternal sleep of an ancient musician. Amma closed his eyes completely, the moonlight tracing his ridge-like gray armor and parallel spikes, turning him into the most serene and everlasting statue of life upon this ancient wilderness. 100 million years passed like an invisible torrent, washing over every corner of the continent, leveling the ancient woods and transforming the flourishing plains into today's red rock deserts. Enveloped by layers of silt, leaves, and volcanic ash, Amma's graceful body underwent mineralized change. Eventually, every tiny vertebra and trace of long spikes fused perfectly with the cold stone, becoming part of the Earth's own skeleton. Because he died in absolute peace, undisturbed by predators, when the joint archaeological team gently brushed away the last layer of red soil 100 million years later, every scholar present was stunned by the breathtaking completeness of the remains. It was flawlessly preserved. The slender skull and unique twin spine rows were crystal clear, the back still maintaining that healing posture of relaxing in the wind, perfect as a gray deity that had just fallen asleep at midnight. The world marveled in scientific papers at the milestone significance of this fossil in evolutionary history, defining his existence with professional terms and analyzing his structural weight-bearing limits. Yet few could pierce through those cold academic names to see the Cretaceous night, filled with low-frequency white noise, that had once comforted Amma's entire life. True strength never needs to prove itself through roars and slaughter, it is always contained within the deepest quiet and self-restraint, much like this long lullaby Amma wrote with his entire life. Now, you too might be lying in a sanctuary of your own, free from the storms of the Cretaceous and the worldly chaos that brings you tension and anxiety. Those daytime trivialities that left you exhausted and perplexed are, before the boundless river of time, nothing more than an insignificant grain of sand in the wilderness, not worth sacrificing your sleep for. The earth will cradle your tired body with the gentlest gravity and endless night, just as it accepted Amma tens of millions of years ago, washing away all your unease and tension. Your bed radiates a pleasant warmth, and your soft duvet offers the coziest embrace, mirroring that warm soil and quiet night wind that safely covered Amma eons ago. Drop all defenses and weight from your heart, listen to this story that requires no effort to remember, and let your slow, deep, and measured breathing carry you away. Slowly, close your eyes. Good night, Amma the Amargasaurus, good night, to every soul shedding its heavy armor tonight, returning to an inner mountain-like peace.